Hello, and welcome to Beyond Benchmarking 301, a detailed look at the improvement pathway in completing audits, retrocommissioning, or efficiency improvement measures for the City of San Jose's Beyond Benchmarking phase of the Energy and Water Building Performance Ordinance, or BPO for short. I'm David Kobar, the Climate Corps AmeriCorps Fellow on the BPO team. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go through the presentation. We will allow time at the end for questions and answers. Next slide, please. After completing the first three steps of the Beyond Benchmarking Compliance, which includes the first step, determining your building's Beyond Benchmarking Compliance deadline, the second step, determining whether your building qualifies for a Beyond Benchmarking exemption, and step 3, verifying you have submitted complete and accurate benchmarking data for the previous years. You are ready to get started on your improvement pathway. Step 1, 2, and 3 of Beyond Benchmarking Compliance are expanded on in our Beyond Benchmarking Compliance Guide, and were addressed in more detail in our Beyond Benchmarking 101 webinar. The recording of our first webinar can be found on our Beyond Benchmarking webpage. Next slide, please. Buildings that are found to be on the improvement pathway will follow 4 steps that are outlined within the Beyond Benchmarking Compliance Guide. The Compliance Guide can be found on our Beyond Benchmarking webpage, which is linked at the end of this presentation. The 4th step of the Compliance Guide helps you figure out whether your building is on the performance pathway or the improvement pathway. For this webinar, we will go into further detail on the improvement pathway. The 5th step addresses what qualified service providers are, how to find them, and how they can help your building become efficient and cost-effective in energy and water consumption. The 6th step illustrates 3 improvement pathway options that owners can choose from that suits their unique situations and needs. And lastly, the 7th step will explain how owners and qualified service providers can complete the improvement pathway submittal reports. Next slide, please. A building will be on the improvement pathway if the building is unable to meet the energy and/or water efficiency standards, or if the property does not have 3 years of compliant benchmarking data. The mentioned energy and water efficiency standards are outlined in the Beyond Benchmarking Compliance Guide and were addressed in the Beyond Benchmarking 201 webinar. The recording of our 201 webinar can be found on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage. When a building heads down the improvement pathway, the owners or managers of the building have a choice between 3 different improvement pathways. The 3 different pathways are an audit, retrocommissioning, and/or 2 efficiency improvement measures. When the pathway is chosen, owners must have a licensed professional perform the actions and create a report for submittal. Next slide, please. A service provider that may perform an audit, retrocommissioning, or targeted efficiency improvement measures for the purposes of the ordinance and the improvement pathway is a person that is qualified to complete a given Beyond Benchmarking action, produce a report, verify that the project and any associated follow-up actions were completed, and submit the improvement pathway form with the project report included to the City of San Jose. More detailed definitions of the service provider certifications in regard to audit, retrocommissioning, and efficiency improvement measures can be found in our Beyond Benchmarking Compliance Guide, as well as in the official ordinance. Next slide, please. The San Jose's list of qualified service providers, a list of qualified auditors and retrocommissioning professionals is one place where you could find a qualified service provider. The service providers on this list have undergone an official request for information process stating that they meet the ordinance's specified requirements for the qualifications needed to perform audits, retrocommissioning, and/or efficiency improvement measures for compliance with the ordinance. The City of San Jose's Environmental Services Department does not endorse any service provider on the list and does not assume any liability in connection with the use of the list of qualified service providers. Please visit the Beyond Benchmarking webpage for the most up-to-date version of the list. You can also use the Environmental Protection Agency's Energy Star list of licensed professionals, or you can hire a professional found on your own accord. Please note that professionals selected that are not on the San Jose's list of qualified service providers will need to provide the city documentation showing their qualifications and proof of possessing a valid San Jose business license prior to submitting a report on behalf of a covered building owner. Please refer to our Beyond Benchmarking Compliance Guide for tips on choosing a service provider that could be found on page 16 of the Compliance Guide. Next slide, please. An owner can meet the improvement pathway by one of three ways: conducting an audit, performing retrocommissioning, or adopting efficiency improvement measures. Each of these will be discussed in further detail in coming slides. Each of the three options share a similar process overall. That first process is the project completion. Buildings must complete a minimum of one of three actions for each unmet standard. If you're unable to meet efficiency standards for both energy and water, you must complete the improvement pathway for each. The next process shared is the project timeline. The action must have been completed no earlier than 5 years prior to the building's beyond benchmarking deadline. At a minimum, the action must be planned and a service provider selected by the building's beyond benchmarking deadline. If the project has not been completed by the deadline, you must submit documentation showing that the project has been permitted and/or contracted. The action must then be completed at the building prior to its next beyond benchmarking compliance deadline, which will fall 5 years after the first deadline. Note that the uncompleted action may not be used for meeting compliance in future cycles should the building require further improvement actions. If documentation is submitted showing that an action is planned but has not been completed by the deadline, the compliance status for the building will be marked as pending, project underway. It will not be marked into compliance until the action has been completed and an improvement pathway form has been submitted to the city. The next process that is similar is record keeping. It is required that the building owner maintains records related to benchmarking, audits, retrocommissioning, and efficiency improvement measures that were completed for compliance with the ordinance. Records must be maintained for a minimum of 5 years. When a building is sold, copies of the records must be given to the new owner. The final process is reporting. Once the selected action has been completed, an improvement pathway form containing the project report and signed by the service provider must be submitted to the city. Next slide, please. Now for a little more detail on the audit option. An audit is complete analysis of a building's energy and/or water efficiency and includes the measures that a building owner can take to make the building more efficient. An audit provides the specific information necessary for building owners and managers to make informed decisions about capital improvements. This pathway is beneficial to owners and managers by providing the specific information necessary to make the informed decisions about capital improvements. An energy audit performed for compliance with beyond benchmarking must meet or exceed the following: a level 2 audit standards in conformance with the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers, ASHRAE for short, and it's a standard 211 to 218 standard for commercial building energy audits, the last edition at the time the audit is initiated, or an energy assessment or audit offered by the utilities serving the property, provided that the potential savings opportunities related to all energy sources are evaluated. The water audit required by this chapter shall be performed in accordance with industry standard practices until such time as a third-party verifiable water auditing process is developed and endorsed by a professional building association, governmental entity, or academic institution, and as approved by the director of the department. Water audit of the base building system shall include at a minimum the following: potable water distribution systems, landscape irrigation systems, water reuse systems, and water features. Next slide, please. Now on to more detail on the retrocommissioning option. Retrocommissioning is a form of commissioning, and commissioning is a process that ensures building systems are designed, installed, functionally tested, and capable of being operated and maintained according to the owner's operational needs. Retrocommissioning is the same systematic process applied to existing buildings that have never been commissioned to ensure that their systems can be operated and maintained according to the owner's needs. With a typical payback period of less than 3 years, retrocommissioning has shown to be one of the most cost-effective means of improving energy efficiency in commercial buildings. Energy retrocommissioning performed for compliance with the beyond benchmarking must meet or exceed the following requirements. It must be performed in accordance with industry standard practices, including the ASHRAE Guideline Point 2, commissioning process for existing systems and assemblies, and other standards as defined by the City of San Jose's Environmental Services Department. The retrocommissioning of the base building systems must ensure that all systems are maintained, cleaned, and repaired. HVAC temperature and humidity set points and setbacks are appropriate. Operating schedules reflect major space occupancy patterns and the current facility requirements, and that all operating parameters are adjusted to achieve efficient operations. And must include at a minimum following: HVAC systems and controls, indoor lighting systems and controls, water heating systems, and renewable energy systems. Water retrocommissioning performed for the compliance with beyond benchmarking must meet or exceed the following requirements as well. That is, performed in accordance with industry standard practices, such as the ASHRAE Guideline Point 2 commissioning process for existing systems and assemblies, and other standards as defined by the City of San Jose's Environmental Services Department. The retrocommissioning of the base building systems must include at a minimum potable water distribution systems, landscape irrigation systems, water reuse systems, and water features. Next slide, please. And finally, we will discuss more detail on the efficiency improvement measure option. An efficiency improvement measure is an action that is implemented to reduce the amount of energy or water used to perform a function. There are many different types of efficiency improvement measures, such as switching out less efficient appliances for more efficient models, or implementing a demand response program to encourage a reduction in energy use through behavior change. This option is ideal for buildings that do not have central heating or cooling HVAC systems. You must complete a minimum of 2 efficiency improvement measures for each unmet standard. If you have chosen to complete measures for both energy and water, you must complete 2 for energy and 2 for water, totaling 4 measures. If you have chosen to complete measures for only one of the 2 utilities, energy or water, you must complete 2 for the chosen utility. This option requires you to provide information on the base building systems and equipment, a list of all efficiency improvement measures that can reduce energy or water use, associated savings, and the cost of each measure. This information could be gathered through an ASHRAE Level 1 audit. For owners interested in this pathway, there is a list of efficiency improvement measures provided within the Beyond Benchmarking Compliance Guide, which is found on our Beyond Benchmarking webpage. Next slide, please. The last step to take within your improvement pathway is to submit your form. Submit an improvement pathway compliance form located on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage to the city. You must attach your Level 2 audit report, retrocommissioning report, or efficiency measure report, and any other supporting documentation to your submission. The service provider that completed the project must sign the form attesting to the quality and completeness of the work they performed. Details on what each audit, retrocommissioning, and efficiency improvement measures report specifically contains can be found on the Beyond Benchmarking Compliance Guide. Please note that it is okay if you do not complete your chosen improvement pathway project by your Beyond Benchmarking deadline. If this applies to your building, then you'll need to attach supporting documentation to your form that shows your project has been contracted and/or permitted and a qualified service provider has been selected. The action must be completed at the building prior to its next Beyond Benchmarking compliance deadline. The uncompleted action may not be used for meeting compliance in future cycles should the building require further improvement actions. All compliance forms will be located on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage and will be made available no later than March 1st, 2023. We will be having one final webinar in March on the form submittal process. The webinar schedule, recordings, and signups can be found on the Beyond Benchmarking webpage. Next slide, please. Now that we have gone through the details of the improvement pathway, we highly encourage you to take advantage of the many helpful resources that exist. They all live on our Beyond Benchmarking webpage. You will find a step-by-step compliance guide, FAQs, the compliance schedule, webinar schedule and signups, and etc. We are also here to help. Email us at benchmarking@sanjoseca.gov. You can also visit our main building performance ordinance website for additional resources on the ordinance and to submit benchmarking reports for previous years, for example. We will be having one final webinar in March on the form submittal process. The webinar schedule, recordings, and signups can be found on our Beyond Benchmarking webpage. Next slide, please. Thank you so much for joining us as we made our way through the presentation. We are going to open up the floor to questions for the remaining time.
All right, thank you so much, David. Okay, I see we've gotten one question in the Q&A. Question from Brian: can the service provider performing the audit be from out of state? So off the top of my head, I do not have a yes or no answer for that question. I don't personally know all that's entailed in attaining a San Jose business license. But I'm going to link to the website where you can find information on acquiring a San Jose business license. And they have an email that you could reach out to more specifically about any questions related to getting that license. Let's see, I'm going to type the link under your question. And yeah, Jessica and Michael, do you have any insight on the technicalities behind getting a San Jose business license by any chance? It's okay if not.
Not about getting a San Jose business license, but the way I understand it is that a qualified service provider can be out of state, but they must be able to meet the qualified service provider requirements that allow them to provide services in California, such as any license that are specific to California that are required to be a qualified service provider, and also able to obtain a San Jose business license, which I believe out of state businesses can obtain it if they meet specific requirements.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And yeah, that link, Brian, is a good place. And yeah, feel free to follow up with us at our benchmarking email if you have follow-up questions about that. And feel free to raise your hand, any of you, if you wish to talk. Unfortunately, I have to unmute you if you want to speak. But yeah, do we have any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. All right, I'm not seeing anyone raising their hands, so we'll go ahead and conclude today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Yes, please visit our website, reach out to us over email. We're definitely happy to help, and hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.